starting kind of earlier in your life, as you look back, I mean, obviously you grew up in Evansville, so the heartland.
Evansville, Indiana. Yep.
So what are some things? So you're a prolific writer, and I think you are intentional about the things that you write, because I think you try to use your voice to really elevate stories and experiences that many people face, and do it in a way that kind of, I think, gives voice to it, but also tries to tell them, I see you, I see you, and you're not alone. I'd love to kind of dive like a little bit, because it seems like, as if I read between the lines, correct me if I'm wrong, you've had some people, whether it's family, I think family and friends, that are seem to be unbelievably supportive. Which is a powerful thing for a person in your position, to have people in your corner, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me a little bit about that support system that you think that I feel, at least as an outsider looking in to your life, how that's shaped what you do, what you focus on, what you write about?
Yeah, I think that's a great insight. I think it's very true. Growing up in Evansville, Indiana, I had a great childhood. I have fantastic parents, very supportive parents, a great little sister as well. When I decided to leave Evansville and go to New York to attend West Point for undergrad, my family was thrilled. I think they were a little scared. Not many people in my family had kind of left Evansville. And shortly after I got to West Point, I guess I was a sophomore. This was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So the policy that prohibited gay and lesbian service members from being out with their sexual orientation. I came out to my parents. So I was a sophomore at West Point. I came out to my sister as well, which was kind of a big gamble. I had no idea, kind of how the chips would fall. And I realized very early on I was exceptionally lucky. My parents, just basically told me, we love you. We don't care about who you love or who you want to love. That has no bearing on our support and love for you. And I think that has really, really shaped me, and allowed me to do things and to take risks and to write the things that I write, knowing that I have that foundation kind of underneath me.
Yeah, those are some powerful, simple words, but also powerful words. We love you. I think it's, when someone hears that, whatever their circumstance, I think they feel trusted, they feel empowered, they feel, okay, I can go do this, because I have people in my corner. So that's helpful. Especially you went to West Point. I was in the Army myself. I didn't go to West Point. I did ROTC. And I also was in the military during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And it's a subculture in American society, where, especially at that time, those things were not talked about, nope. and if anything, they were talked negatively about.
Oh yeah.
And you went to the belly of the beast. You went to the U.S. Military Academy, intentionally. So talk to me about that. Like, how did you, Evansville, so I've talked to several people that ended up at West Point, some because that was their family history, and that was just a heritage. And then some that sought it out, some that didn't even know what it was, but were kind of encouraged to apply. How did you end up wanting to do the West Point route?
Yeah, it was a crazy journey. No one in my family had really served in the military. I had, great grandparents who'd served in like World War I, but no kind of immediate family members that had served. And certainly no one that had ever attended West Point. And it's funny that I actually found out about West Point from a really good friend of mine who I ran cross country with in high school. And she spent a summer at the Naval Academy for one of their programs for high school students. And she's like, Emily, it's really intense. They yell at you. You do push-ups. You love it. You should look into it.
For punishment.
Yeah. They're like, you're intense. Like, you'll like this. So sure enough, I looked it up. I looked up West Point. I looked up the Naval Academy, and I think I was instantly just like, this is what I have to do. September 11th had happened when I was in high school. So that deeply affected me. I was a little young and naive, but very patriotic. And, I'd never been to New York City. I didn't know what the World Trade Center was, but it impacted, all of us. And so once I found out about West Point, I was pretty sold. It had everything I wanted. A great education. I wanted to serve in some capacity. I wanted to be part of something much bigger than myself. And so West Point seemed just kind of like the perfect place for that, and a place to challenge myself. I really wanted to do something hard, and I couldn't think of anything harder than that. So, yeah.
Which is, yeah, I have friends in both ROTC, West Point, and I grew up a military brat, and I can trace military service all the way back to pre-Civil War, and I still did it. And I actually intentionally didn't go to West Point. I didn't even know, because everybody I talked to that had done it, they appreciated it after the fact. And I was like, man, college is supposed to be the best time of your life, and you appreciated it? But it sounds like you really enjoyed it.
Fair. I know people think I'm crazy when I say it. I truly loved West Point. Make no mistake, the first year was miserable, but I'll say that the ensuing 3 years made up for it by far.
Well, I think part of that, correct me if I'm wrong, you write about it, but you mentioned the family, that you called it the family. So can you talk a little bit about the family at West Point that really, I think, probably helps support that and make it more of a tolerable scenario for you?
Yeah, it's not something that people would expect. I think that is actually the secret sauce. The thing that made West Point so special for me was when I came out to my family as gay. I came out to a few friends of mine at West Point as well, and pretty quickly realized that there was a strong kind of underground network of LGBT cadets that were there. Obviously, we all had to hide our sexuality, our orientation, but we were always able to find each other. And so, I had this incredible tight-knit group of friends. And I think enduring the policy of Don't Ask, Don't Tell brought us together in a really unique way. I wrote about how we would, get on the train to go to New York City. And I got to experience gay bars in New York City for the first time. Got to go to my first pride parades in places like New York and Boston. And, so it was just a really special group of friends. And I feel like that in some odd way, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy brought us together even closer, kind of the shared struggle that we had. It was a really special place. I really enjoyed those years. It was hard. I'm not going to say it wasn't hard, but just the kinds of bonds that we developed were really enduring.
Well, and I think where we've gotten to as a nation, at least with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and other things that have limited female soldiers, female officers in our services. I think the nostalgia of looking back, you appreciate maybe the struggle in the midst of it. You wouldn't give me the same right. Thought.
I know. But cadet might feel differently. Yeah.
But I think that's a helpful context because you endured a ton, but you also, with the resolve of friends and family, we've accomplished a lot, and I think in a short period of time, which is great. So let's fast forward, because your resume is impressive. Obviously U.S. Army officer, combat veteran. You inevitably left due to an injury that you experienced in Afghanistan. But through that kind of trial, you and some friends, fellow soldiers, started a social enterprise. So Rumi Spices, talk to me a little bit about the journey to starting Rumi. You got to throw in the Shark Tank Mark Cuban story, because I think some people don't know that. Give us some insight into Rumi and what that looks like in the midst of your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rumi Spice is a social enterprise, a for-profit B corporation. We import premium saffron and other products directly from Afghan farmers, and we sell it to some of the best chefs and restaurants and grocery stores in America, and also direct to consumer. But probably helpful if I back up a bit for the origin of it. So I found myself in Afghanistan. I was on a really unique mission that I think a lot of people still don't know about. But we had essentially about 10 years into the war, the military realized, hey, we've got these very elite forces, SEAL Team 6, Army Rangers, who were out there, doing night raids, working in the villages for village stability operations. And they're all male forces, right? And so we were kind of ignoring what they call the other 50% of the population, the women and children. It was culturally unacceptable for these guys to go and speak with the women and children. And so they realized, hey, we need to recruit women, incredibly physically fit, culturally astute women to work with these guys, to go out on missions with Rangers, with SEAL Team 6, with Special Forces. So I was the second cohort of women that had an opportunity to do this mission set. And so did 2 deployments to Afghanistan with them, and it just completely opened my eyes. I kind of fell in love with Afghanistan, frankly. The people, the country. It's just, I think there's a big misunderstanding about what, Afghanistan is, because it's only been kind of understood through the lens of war for most Americans. But so I was there in Afghanistan actually at the same time as my future co-founder, Kim. We were both West Point classmates, both Army engineer officers, and we were in Afghanistan at the same time doing very different missions. So Kim was an engineer officer, and she was looking for roadside bombs, so doing what we call route clearance, looking for the IEDs on the sides of the road. And of course, I was going on night raids, right, with Army Rangers, kind of night after night. And we would sit on the phone at night, and we would kind of converse back and forth about what we called the endless cycle of violence, which was, Kim would go out, find an IED, clear it, and then soon enough the next day, 4 more, 5 more in its place. And the same for me, right? I felt like, we would go out, we would nab the bad guys, and then the next day 5 more would pop up. So it kind of felt like this never-ending cycle of violence. And Kim and I started talking about, these are kind of the symptoms of a problem, but how do we get to the root of the problem itself? And we both felt like a lot of the Afghans that turned to the Taliban, weren't evil people. Not all of them were bad. A lot of them did it because they got paid. So I think for us, it was a light bulb moment where we realized, hey, if you can find an economic alternative for these Afghans, maybe we could turn them away from, joining forces with the Taliban and things like that. So I think, those early days in Afghanistan definitely was kind of a light bulb moment for us. We decided to get out of the Army. We both served about 5 years, and that led us to business school together. So we both went to Harvard together to get our MBA. And that's when our third co-founder, Keith, he was still in Afghanistan. We were in an entrepreneurship class at Harvard. Excuse me. And that's when he kind of pitched the idea of, hey, like, I've found farmers out here that grow some of the best, freshest saffron I've ever smelled, tasted. What if we started importing this to the US? And so that's really where the idea started. And that's, kind of Kim and I ran with that in our entrepreneurship class. And it took off from there.
And it's based out of Chicago. And inevitably, obviously I mentioned jokingly earlier, it was on Shark Tank and received an investment from Mark Cuban. Where is it today? I mean, you guys have been at it for several years. It's still alive and kicking, but how's it going? And what's it looking like for the future of Rumi Spice?
Yeah. It's been really exciting. I mean, when Kim and I first got it going, we had about 12 farmers, so it was pretty small. We would get direct shipments of the saffron, and in the early days, we started by kind of knocking on doors at restaurants, trying to get a couple minutes of time with the chefs. And it was always interesting because, it's not exactly easy to sell a food product from Afghanistan. You get a lot of, skeptical, chefs looking at us. But the moment that they would smell the saffron, they're just, everything about their demeanor changed. So, in the early days, it helped that we got our foothold with, some of the best chefs in the world, Danielle Boulou, Thomas Keller of the French Laundry. Wow. And now, I think it's really exciting. The harvest is about to happen. So it's an annual harvest, happens about every October, November. And now we're working with, I think, upwards of 400 farmers, and we're employing thousands of Afghan women in the process as well, which was a big part of the mission for us. We were very clear about wanting to be a for-profit business, but we also wanted to ensure that we were training and employing Afghan women. One thing we realized was these women were doing the work. The saffron harvest is kind of an all hands on deck community effort. And the women had been harvesting it for decades, right? But they've never been paid for their work. So when we set up our processing facilities in Afghanistan, we made sure to, we wanted to hire women to work in those facilities, which was a big shift. We had our Afghan partners. They had to literally go to every one of the women's, husband or father or brother to get permission for them to work in our facility. And so yeah, we've grown a lot. Really exciting shift. We're bringing in more products. We've just launched a cumin line, and we're looking at other really fresh spices from Afghanistan. So it's been an exciting expansion. We're the first product to make it nationwide in Whole Foods. So that was a really big moment for the team. And, we work with Blue Apron and other distributors too. So,
and what's your role with the company still?
Yeah, right now, co-founder. I know I help with sales where I can, and a little bit more of a hands-off role. I stepped away from the operational day-to-day work, but still a shareholder, still a co-founder. So care deeply about the success of the company for sure.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a helpful picture, because I think sometimes people are like, wow, you've got to be in it, 40 hours a week. That you got to be your lifetime thing, and I think the reality is like, no, people can do multiple things. And that's what you're able to help support the expansion and the operations of Rumi Spice. You help get it off the ground, but now you're onto other things. And you can do that. You can manage the prolific writing that you're doing, and federal grant writing through the EDA, and all of these other things, as an entrepreneur and as a leader. So it's pretty impressive. Before we fast forward to your current work, one of my you'll appreciate, I think, one of my military heroes was Colin Powell. My dad served with him in Germany back in the 1980s. And he's well known for his 13 life principles. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but so I actually have a lot of my team write out, because I think it's helpful. Like, what are those values that drive you? And I asked some of my guests on the podcast kind of what drives them. But I think because of the thread of your life from service, from combat to now Rumi Spices and EDA, I'm really curious to know, if you could rattle off a couple of your life principles. What are those values that you hold dear? Those things that you are, pushing forward as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of central to everything I've done is I want impact to be kind of front and center for me. And I think impact can take many different forms. Certainly when we started Rumi Spice, our focus was on, making a fantastic product, but also ensuring that we, positively impacted the lives of our farmers, of our women employees. That was really important to me. A lot of people scratch their head when I tell them I left my company and I'm working for the federal government. It's a startup, and the federal government just couldn't be more different. But I try to tell people, there's no better place than the role I'm in right now at the Department of Commerce to make impact at scale. And I really think we need more entrepreneurs that want to do even short tours of service. That's kind of what I call it, a tour of duty in government, where you're able to make impact at scale, at a nationwide level. So I think for me, it's the impact. I keep coming back to that. And I think the other thing that has always been I don't know if you can call it a principle, but I'm sure you've heard of the Jeff Bezos regret minimization framework. Mm-hmm. And for me, the question that always kind of rings in my ears is in X years, will I regret not doing this? Mm. And I'll tell you, when I was in business school, all my classmates were trying to get consulting jobs and investment banking jobs, and nothing against those jobs. They're great for certain people. But I think for me, I really was just pulled to, I think I've got to make an impact in a different way. People thought we were absolutely insane to start a company based in Afghanistan where a war is still going on, importing food products. People just looked at us like we had a third eyeball. Whereas I think we saw this just phenomenal opportunity. And I asked myself, in 10 years, am I going to regret not trying to start a company, not trying to start something new, and to leverage my experience in Afghanistan? We were just perfectly positioned with our networks and our expertise and knowledge of the country to do it. So I think that's another thing I think a lot about. And on days when I get really tired, there's an Afghan proverb I say to myself, just to level myself. It's drop by drop a river is made. It's day by day, one saffron thread at a time, one grant at a time. Hopefully we are making a difference
Sure.
a difference in communities' lives and people's lives. So I'd say that's some of the things that certainly drive me.
That's powerful. Well, okay, so I want to dive into your current work, but I actually think before we get into that, it requires a little setup, a little tee up, because I think you said Department of Commerce, and then there's other acronyms like EDA, OIE.
Yep.
So
the acronym.
Oh yeah, the acronym game in the military. Yep, government loves them. Help our listeners understand. Okay, what's the what is the Department of Commerce's role in the midst of EDA, in the midst of OIE, and what are you working on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Department of Commerce is our big agency, and the U.S. Economic Development Administration, EDA, is a bureau in the Department of Commerce. So technically, I belong to EDA, and we are within kind of the org chart of Department of Commerce. And then the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship is nestled inside EDA. So our work is really all about furthering tech-based economic development. So figuring out ways to empower high growth entrepreneurship, increase access to capital, and really accelerate innovation and commercialization. Those are the things that drive our country forward from an economic perspective. So our office is really laser focused on that tech-based economic development and supporting it.
That's great. And your role specifically, correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of obviously working in to support the OIE's mission overall, but also policy side. So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis for you? Like, what are you working on inside of?
Yeah, it's really fun. One thing I tell people is I was really torn whether I should go to business school or whether I should go to public policy school. And so I tell people, I chose my MBA, but this is my public policy degree. I feel like I'm like getting my public policy degree working with OIE, kind of leveraging all of my experience on the entrepreneurial side and bringing those ideas into government. So what I do on a day-to-day basis, OIE, we have our flagship grant program, Built to Scale. Access Ventures, you all recently won an award, which is great. But the Build to Scale program is a $35 million grant program going to support that high growth entrepreneurship and increase access to capital. So we're funding the accelerators, the incubators, the seed funds, the early stage venture funds that really support entrepreneurs. So unlike SBA, we don't support entrepreneurs directly, but we support more at the system level. So how I spend my day now is really developing programs and policies to continue building out our portfolio. So we just launched a STEM Talent Challenge program that I wrote, really about fostering talent in these ecosystems. One thing we hear a lot from these accelerators and incubators, especially in kind of some more of these burgeoning early stage ecosystems, is that they have a desperate need for talent, right? And so this challenge is really designed to kind of build the systems and the talent development strategies to help get that STEM talent into the ecosystems. We're in the middle of working on a pandemic resilience innovation entrepreneurship challenge, which will be, I think, fun. So how can we leverage innovation and entrepreneurship to really fight this pandemic back? So we're hoping to release that really soon. So that's been a big side project of mine. I'm not even sure I would call it a side project. That's been pretty much what I've been focusing on for the past couple of months. But it's really fun.
I was going to ask, no one could have foreseen what COVID was going to do. And so, as you look at what your plans were for 2020, there's Build to Scale, which is kind of an ongoing program, make minor tweaks, I think, year to year. The STEM talent challenge is pretty fascinating. But so talk to me about like, how has the pandemic impacted your work? What do you find yourself focused on? What are the fires, so to speak, in government that you've been deployed to help put out or to address?
Well, EDA received about 1.5 billion in funding through the CARES Act. And as you can imagine, we are the Economic Development Administration. And I think one thing we can all say is that this has devastated our economy. We have unemployment that is through the roof. And so that has really been, we are trying to stop the bleed. So we've really been kind of all hands on deck, running full cylinder ahead to really get this funding out into the communities. So that has been the biggest fire. Is just we've been hiring like crazy to have the staff to be able to get the money out into these communities to make a difference. So that has been an ongoing effort. And then really developing an innovation and entrepreneurship focused challenge was important to us. We have so many fascinating assets within our OAE portfolio of biotech, supply chain, kind of health security accelerators and startups that are really itching for the resources to respond to this pandemic. And so, we're going to do our best to get the money out there to those organizations too.
That's great. So talk to me a little bit about, because I know we talked about your personal values and kind of what's brought you even into the EDA. I've got to imagine though, working with the federal government where you've got all these acronyms and people are, what in the world is that? Commerce, EDA, OIE. Sometimes people don't even know, like the fact that you just threw out $1.5 billion was part of the CARES Act that went to EDA. Some people don't even know that's a reality. Yeah. And that's a lot of money. What are the conversations like? And how are you working to kind of like, to get the information, the word out there? Because if you think about like knowledge is power. If you're in the know, if you're in the network, you're gonna find out about these things, and then you get the money. But as we've seen, because of a lot of the economic injustice for centuries in America, there are a lot of people that don't know. They don't have those networks and those banking relationships established. What do you think EDA, OIE, what can you be doing? What can we be doing to help make sure that these underrepresented founders and communities are served as this money is being deployed?
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's top of mind for me. It's been front and center the entire time. I think it was, the PPP loans were a great example of, just not enough effort was placed on how we, thoughtfully deploy the funding in a way that maybe helps tilt the playing field towards some of our more underrepresented communities. I know for us, we are being as thoughtful as we possibly can about how do we message this, and how do we reach the stakeholders that don't know us? How do we get outside of the bubble of kind of the business as usual? I think from our perspective, we're trying to do new things like better marketing and supporting documents to help us easily translate this stuff. We're trying to have better branding to reach these communities. We're trying to do short documents, 1-pagers at that, right? So instead of these 40-page funding opportunities, which we still have to do, how can we distill those things down into really easily digestible 1-page documents with infographics and webinars that are more easily accessible to communities? So I think we're really trying to lean into more modern branding and marketing practices. So that's one thing we're kind of testing out, and I hope that helps. We're certainly trying to reach a broad base of stakeholders, whether that's through targeting partnerships with HBCUs, some of our more persistent poverty communities, things like that. We're being thoughtful about getting in touch with them as best we can. But it's hard. We're at headquarters. It's a national program, and it's tough. There aren't enough of us to go around.
Well, it's helpful because I actually wrote down your favorite Afghan proverb. Because I saw you write about that at one point. But I think that's a great analogy. Or, there's the analogy of the little girl that throws the starfish back into the ocean. I think sometimes we we can throw these arrows at the federal government, and I think you're helping to kind of humanize internally the struggle to say, like, no, there are people inside of the system, so to speak, that care and are doing their best and trying. It's not perfect, but we've got to figure it out, because to really effectively move money fast into these communities, impact at scale. You and I chatted offline before. Talk to me a little about. Because one of the problems, and this keeps coming up in communities specifically, is there's a capital absorption issue. And so when you talk about impact at scale, you're talking $1.5 billion federally, where you've got to write significant checks into large markets to impact at scale. Yeah. How significant is the capital absorption problem? And by that, I mean like organizations that can handle a significant check, organizations that are positioned well in these communities to really take what they're doing to the next level. Because I think sometimes it's a two-sided sword, right? On one side, maybe they don't need to scale. Maybe what they're doing is effective and awesome and needs to be supported with smaller community checks. And sometimes the trouble is they end up not able to scale, and they close their doors, or the quality of their programming goes down. So how do we balance, like, success doesn't necessarily mean scale, but how do we get organizations to a point where they can receive the capital necessary to scale?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is kind of why I love EDA. I think we're a very flexible agency. We have a broad set of tools that we can use at our disposal to help communities anywhere on the spectrum of where they're at. You know, I think of economic development as kind of a hierarchy of needs. And some communities need more foundational assets, right? Some communities need a wastewater treatment plant or better roads. They need that basic infrastructure. Some need broadband. They need kind of that technical infrastructure. And EDA has tons of programs that are available to help with that. And we have the thing I love about our model, very decentralized model, right? We work in 6 regional offices. We have economic development representatives at the state level that really know these communities and can help them and guide them to the right funding amounts and the right programs. And then for our office, you know, I think tech-based economic development is definitely more at the higher end of the pyramid, right? You have to have that, basic infrastructure, technical infrastructure before you can do things like entrepreneurship support and acceleration. And so not all communities are quite ready for that type of work. And I think we try to be as thoughtful as we can about how do we prepare communities to get to that tech-based economic development level. We've been doing some really interesting work with Center on Rural Innovation. So essentially providing them funding to do technical assistance with rural communities to give them that technical assistance to help them build up to, a build to scale type program. And so that has been a really successful model we've piloted. And I think it'll be fascinating to see if we can replicate that with other communities too. But it's a challenge. Not all communities are ready for it. And, I always want to tell people that, federal money, it can be expensive, right? It's a little confusing. It's the forms aren't easy, the reporting requirements, and I remind people, hey, it's taxpayer dollars. We've got to be smart. Yeah, we got to be smart, and we've got to be good, fiscal agents of that money. So, yeah.
No, that's helpful, because I think the other thing you and I have talked about is just, and it's funny because we were in the government, you got out, which some people are like, oh my gosh, because it's a massive bureaucracy, and you willingly dove back in, and I liken it to like an ocean liner, like I'm on this small little sailboat, so like I can make really quick incremental changes and move an organization or whatever the work that we're doing. You're more like in this like massive ocean liner. And so in order to effectively move change, even internally as an entrepreneur, it's small incremental adjustments over time.
We're on a barge over here.
I'm trying to push it forward.
It's not easy to pivot. I will say, I think the beauty of my current role is that our office I liken it to being a startup in government. And so I think we are given a lot of flexibility to test and iterate and really experiment with ideas from a policy perspective. And so that is really liberating and fun, frankly. So I think, yes, I'm in a bureaucracy, but I think our office is a really special startup in and of itself. So that's fun.
So as you look out across the country, because you work federally, what are some things that you're seeing across the country that are really exciting? Maybe EDA related, but just from your vantage point, what are you seeing as it relates to innovation, entrepreneurship, and communities of color, in underrepresented communities, communities that have limited access? What are you seeing that's really encouraging and exciting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been really excited to see the conversation evolve for our underrepresented entrepreneurs. I mean, the numbers are still pretty abysmal. I think something, I don't have the statistics on me at the moment, but I think something like 1% of African American entrepreneurs are getting venture capital dollars. It's maybe a little bit better for women entrepreneurs, but not by much. I've been really excited to see, a resurgence of energy around increasing access to capital for these communities. I know we have personally talked a lot about the rise of what we call alternative finance, which is also another exciting trend, and something that our office we've already funded a few projects in that space, and we're excited to continue it, which is basically that, venture capital is not for everyone, and sometimes traditional debt isn't either. So what is that middle ground where we can get creative with capital for our entrepreneurs? And I think that has been a really fascinating discussion that I've had with people kind of over and over again. So that's been great to see. And I think the thing that excites me most is just, sitting where I'm at, kind of at the headquarters level with a bird's eye view, just the incredible work that's happening in every corner of this country. I mean, in our last Build to Scale announcement that we just made, we funded the Starburst Accelerator, which is working on aerospace innovation in Los Angeles. We're funding rural venture capital in Colorado. We did a really fun industry challenge with Department of Energy for blue water technology in places like Cleveland. So there's a lot of work happening that I think people unfortunately don't know about. They have just not been exposed to it, but it excites me for the future of our country. There's so much energy happening. So it's been exciting to be part of that.
That's awesome. It's really encouraging to hear you talk about the alternatives to capital, because that's been a growing theme with some of our previous guests, but also just around the country. Access to Capital Lab that Kauffman and Rockefeller launched, and coming out of some of the moonshot work that Kauffman did several years ago, looking at American entrepreneurship, that your office participated in. But it's also encouraging because I think sometimes people look at the federal government as behind in trends, and trying to catch up, like moving this massive barge, if you will, using your analogy. Two things for our listeners. Can you explain a little bit more specifically alternatives to equity? What does that look like, and where do you think the federal government is on that, at least from your perspective, and where are you hoping we can go with some of those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's still early days, and I think part of the perception about federal government being behind isn't because we don't want to innovate. I think it's more because we have statute that we have to follow, and we have teams of lawyers who try to ensure that we stay within the spirit of the statute and the law. And so that is always a little bit of a challenge. I think I'm also very grateful. We have a very innovative team of lawyers who are always happy to figure out how can we get innovative and experiment to help these communities, but also stay true to the statute and what Congress has charged us to do. So, on the alternative capital side, we've been looking at things like revenue-based financing as a really interesting model, instead of, strictly equity-based investing, where you're doing a convertible note or a SAFE or something like that. One other insight that I've found to be interesting is that revenue-based financing could be, I think, a really compelling model in the pandemic right now. I think we're seeing some entrepreneurs that their revenue and their business model has taken a hit temporarily. But let's fast forward, 8 to 12 months, when the market starts to rebound, when we have a vaccine, could revenue-based financing kind of fill the gap for some of these entrepreneurs from a financing perspective? I think we're interested in ways we could support that type of work, from our office's perspective. So, interesting trends there. We've only just kind of dipped our toe in the water and made a first few grants for awards that are doing this type of work. But I think there's a lot of room for growth, and we're definitely paying attention to what the market is saying for sure.
Yeah, no, that's encouraging. So working at the federal government, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm probably representative of a lot of different communities that are not your Silicon Valley, New Yorks and Bostons. What can we do to support your work? Because I think, again, there's a knowledge gap on like what it is that you're doing and how innovative I think OIE and EDA are trying to be inside of the government. How can communities support the work that you're doing to continue to press this forward? What does that look like for communities to be champions of change and innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the easiest way is to talk about it, to amplify the work, and to let others know that we're doing what we're doing and that we exist. And so even just the small amplification of what we do at EDA is critical. And I think the second bucket, which is something we've been doing, is continued policy collaboration, kind of just brainstorming what's possible, what's needed. It's so invaluable to hear directly from communities what they're seeing. You're our eyes and ears on the ground. You're the ones who can help us shape our own policy and programming. And so, attending the conferences that we attend and being able to hear from stakeholders directly has been invaluable to how we shape the programs.
That's great. So for our listeners that may not know about all the offerings of OIE, how can they learn more? What's the best way for them to get connected to the information that's coming out of your office?
Yeah, I would say, obviously feel free to get in touch with us directly. OIE@eda.gov. You can always send us an email or check out our website, eda.gov/OIE. You'll find a lot of great information about all of our programming and all of our policy work. It's a great resource there. We've tried to make it as simple and easy to understand as possible with summaries and infographics and one-pagers that kind of describe the funding opportunities available. But I'd say those are probably the two easiest ways. We're always very responsive, so don't hesitate to reach out to us.